Greetings. Today is Tuesday. Look at the calendar. Tuesday, November 12th. And my name is Mary Cohen. This is the International Music and Justice Inquiry Network, Imagine Caring Communities. And we are honored today to welcome Mandy Gardner and Laura Caufield, who are presenting on a forthcoming book titled Arts in Criminal Justice and Corrections, International Perspectives on Methods, Journeys, and Challenges. All right, let us turn it over to you both. Please introduce yourselves and let us know about this work.
Great. Thank you, Mary. I'll kick off. As I'm just introducing myself, we put together some slides, mainly because they had some images on from the book. I don't know whether you might be able to share them for us if you've got the link there. So, hi everyone. I'm Laura Caulfield. I'm a professor of psychology at the Institute for Community Research and Development at the University of Wolverhampton. So here in the UK. So it's mid-afternoon for us here. So a nice time of day to be presenting. It's, well, partly we're just so excited to be out talking about the book. It comes out this month after what feels like years thinking about this project, working on the chapters, editing it. So the fact that we're here and the book is about to be available is particularly exciting. It's also nice for me to see the names and faces on the call. So there's some people who've contributed to the book. Alma has had a sneak peek and kindly gave us a brilliant endorsement that we're going to share on screen in a little while. And there's some people on the call that I know and know quite well, and other people that I think I haven't met before. So it's great to be here talking to you all about this. What we're going to do is just say something very brief about what the book is, but we then wanted to spend a little bit of time talking to you about the genesis of the book. So why have we written the book, and why have we written it in the way that we have? Because I think in many ways it does something that is probably slightly unusual, and I think we haven't quite seen in other things that we've read. And then after we've talked to you a little bit about the genesis, the idea for the book, we'll then just go into a little bit of detail and perhaps hear from a couple of the chapter authors as well. The book, I think, we think is probably the first book to bring together this range of researchers from such a wide range of different disciplines, different countries, also with different lived experiences that have brought them on this journey towards the research that they talk about in the book. And in many ways, we've used this collection to try and define the field of arts in criminal justice and corrections. And the reason that I say that I think we've done something which is perhaps a little bit unusual is that we have paired chapters written by a range of authors that look at the research and the methods, but pairing them with in-depth profiles about those authors. And we'll talk to you a little bit more about that and the reason why we've done that pairing and the value that we think that brings. I think I've just seen a message go up about the slides, so Mary, I'll see if I can share that with you again in a minute. But Mandy, shall I pass to you while we do that in the background, perhaps to say something about the genesis of the book?
I'm Mandy Gardner, and I'm with Southwest Correctional Arts Network, and we run the. Well, let me move back. I actually wanted to talk about how I met Laura and what our organization does. About 10 years ago, we put together a annotated bibliography of evidence-based research into arts and corrections programs, which I realize is a mouthful. It was funded by the National Endowment for the Arts, and it's basically a database of all research into U.S. Arts and corrections program, juvenile and adult, and that's a living document. We keep adding to it. And as it turned out, I met Laura at over breakfast in the cafeteria at Loyola Marymount University. We were there for the California Lawyers for the Arts and Corrections conference, which used to happen biannually. And serendipitously, Laura was an advisor to the UK National Criminal Justice Arts Alliance, which had done a similar document called the Evidence Library, and our bibliography was modeled on that library. And so we asked Laura to be a board member for SCAN, which was one of the best things we'd done. My background is more from a narrative point of view. I've been a creative writing practitioner in homeless shelters, jails. Now I'm working with a community center for low-income artists. And I felt like I suddenly became the curator of this bibliography, and I knew a bit about research, not as much as Laura, obviously. And I felt like I needed to learn more. So I kind of joke that this whole project came out of a place of ignorance, although curiosity might be a better descriptor. And I decided that the best way to learn would be to talk to the people who are doing the research. And so that led to a long conversation with Larry Brewster, who's kind of the dean of prison arts research. And that led to an article, a profile of him, which was equally a profile of California Arts and Corrections that appeared in the Journal of Prison Education and Reentry in 2020. And then Laura and I started talking about other articles we could do. And I actually interviewed Mary Cohen. And we decided, well, why not put together a book? And so that was the genesis of the book. Also underlying the genesis was this tension that I had always felt between what I call narratives and numbers, narratives of the redemptive qualities of arts education appealing to hearts, while the numbers appeal more to minds, and specifically the minds of people who hold the purse strings. And we decided to combine them, both to humanize the field of research, which usually doesn't rate very high on the sexy scale, but also to give a sense of these really interesting intersections between people in the free world and people not in the free world, and how those intersections really strengthen community and society. So that was the background of the book, and which is almost out. So.
Thanks, Mandy. And I'm just typing away in the background to Mary to see if we can get those slides up. There's some great pictures on there that I think would be really keen to share with some of you. It just gives you a little bit of an insight into some of what's covered in the chapters. But one of the things that when we're talking about the genesis of the book, so Mandy said a little bit about how we met and how we arrived at this, the idea for this book. But I think, well, those of you on the call who already know me will know that I've been undertaking research in the field of arts and criminal justice for quite a long time now, but I very much describe myself as a methods geek, and I've spent a long time thinking about and undertaking studies to try and evidence the impact of the arts in criminal justice. And I've been really conscious that, over 15 or 20 years, I've been out there doing this research, and along the way, while obsessively thinking about research methods, also meeting all of these amazing people who I just might not have been exposed to in other parts of my life. So not only being out there working in prisons and criminal justice, but meeting artists and practitioners and researchers who come from all of these different worlds, some of whom have, been on a journey towards becoming a researcher, perhaps after being incarcerated themselves, or being a practitioner who also conducts research. So I kind of thought, all these amazing people that I've met and all of this research that I've been doing, but I hadn't really ever thought about bringing the two together. And actually talking to Mandy, it really helped me see that, of course, it just makes perfect sense that the individuals undertaking the work, the people particularly who've been involved in this book, that their own journeys and life experiences are so relevant to the research and the work that they undertake. So to write something actually that shines a light on that, that helps explain that relationship, but also the impact that doing research in this area with this particular focus has on us as researchers as well, and the way that we think about things, that bringing all of this together felt like an important thing to do for lots of reasons, not least that if we're thinking about grappling with things like methods and research studies in this area, I think it breaks down some of the barriers to really getting into that if you can understand a little bit more about the people who've been undertaking this work. Mandy and I had a little chat just before this session, just to quickly decide what it was that we wanted to talk about. And I said that I would give a bit of an overview of the book, and so I went back and read the introductory chapter that we've written, and I thought actually what I might do is just read you a couple of key paragraphs from that chapter, because I think in honing the writing we've articulated it quite nicely. So I'm just going to read you this couple of paragraphs that really tell you something in a bit more detail about what the book is about and what it seeks to do. And then I'll pass over to Mandy, who's going to start us off just looking in a bit more detail, and maybe we might hear from a couple of the authors as well through that conversation. One of the things that we do touch on in the book, particularly in the introductory chapter, is this sense that there is a really long and substantial history to the arts in criminal justice and corrections, and we've found references going back hundreds of years in some cases to this work happening in prisons and other justice settings. But really, to situate the book, we kind of dive in about 40 years ago, and over the last 40 years, arts programmes for people in contact with the criminal justice system have increased, not just in number, but in stature in countries all around the world. The programmes include a wide range of arts practice and approaches, from fine art to music, drama, design, art therapy. And there is now a body of international research that highlights the impact of the arts in criminal justice and corrections. And mirroring the range of art programmes, researchers in this area come from an array of disciplines, including criminology, theatre, psychology, creative writing, music, art therapy, and several more. The research methods implemented and developed by these researchers reflect this variety of experience, centering around a shared interest in the role of the arts in social justice. So in many ways, the study of the arts in criminal justice has pioneered the more recent focus in academia for inter and multidisciplinary research. So, as we've already alluded to, this book brings together interdisciplinary and international experts, beginning with the original pioneers of research into the arts and corrections in the USA in the 1980s, but then also shares some of the work of bright new thinkers, one of whom is on this call today, from right across the world, who are really pushing the field forward. The book explores the role of researchers in evidencing impact and influencing policy, then takes the reader on a series of journeys, including those who were themselves incarcerated and those who have transitioned from practitioner to researcher. The book concludes with chapters that call for researchers to foreground the voice of those working in and impacted by the criminal justice system, challenging the oppressive systems of prisons and punishment. And I'll just very briefly say that we ended the book, and we've ended the process of writing and editing the book with the hope that it will present a call to action for researchers to consider how their own work can be used to share the voice and experience of people impacted by the criminal justice system, but more how it can create change in society. And I know that being on this call today and talking to all of you. I think that probably resonates quite strongly. Thanks, Mary. So I'm assuming that these are displaying okay on screen. I'm going to pass to Mandy now, and what I might do as Mandy starts to talk to us about the structure of the book is just pop some of these images on screen. So there's just a handful of images. There are lots of brilliant images throughout the chapters in the book, but we just picked a selection. So I'll pass to Mandy now. Oh, Mandy, you're on mute.
Well, that's not helpful. We organized the book into 3 sections, and in a way, the part 1 is called The Impact of the Arts in Criminal Justice and Corrections, What Works, How It Works, and Why. In a sense, that was starting with the future. In my conversations with Larry Brewster, who was really kind of one of, if not the first person to do research into arts and corrections programs, that the question that had really bugged him all these years was, why did these programs work? The studies had shown much of what, but we were missing a lot of the how and why. And we have two of the contributors on this call, Jack Bowers and Silke, who address that question of why. Obviously, it's something that's still revealing itself, but I'm going to ask them in a minute if they can talk a little bit about that. And the second part is a researcher's journey, and here we cover, in a way, how the practitioner researchers' intersection with research has changed them and changed how they view research. And part 3 actually moves, there's a sort of natural narrative arc here, but part 3 moves into foregrounding the stories of the people who are actually participating in these arts programs. And among other things, we have a chapter by Reggie Daniels, who is a formerly incarcerated scholar, now in San Francisco. And there seems to be, and we have contributors from 3 continents, and this has really given us a sense not only of how different geographies are approaching issues of incarceration differently, but how there also seems to be an arc away from endpoints that look at, correcting the incarcerated person, to incorporating their views and moving towards outcomes that incorporate desistance and abolition. And I was wondering if we could turn it over really briefly to Jack and then Silke. Jack has worked really closely with Larry Brewster and Lori over the years with the California Arts and Corrections Project, and their chapter really details a project that they undertook to try to discover the why, like what theories would explain why arts and corrections are so effective, because most studies do show benefits in far-reaching domains, from the recidivism, which is more in the correctional realm, but all the way up to confidence and social skills and desistance measures and that kind of thing. So, Jack, do you want to give us a brief summary of what you did with the Cincinnati checklist?
Oh, yeah, sure. Thanks so much. So let's see. Just very briefly, I've been associated with the prison arts program since 1980. I went down to Soledad Prison to teach a songwriting workshop then, and ended up being the full-time institution artist facilitator at Soledad for 25 years. And then I've worked with the William James Association since then, mentoring younger artists, working with Larry and Lori Brooks on this research project, working with Alma and getting the Arts and Corrections program restarted beginning in 2012. So anyway, it's been a wonderful journey for me, and really taught me a lot about the strength of human beings in difficult circumstance, and how inspiring that can be. So briefly, the work we did was began in 2012 when we were trying to restart the Arts and Corrections program. And we were working with Alma. We reached out to Larry, who'd done that early research on basically it was a disciplinary reduction. This was the 1983 study, and it took place at Soledad actually. And some of the research subjects were students of mine, curiously, and Larry was able to demonstrate by examining the files of the prisoners, he was able to demonstrate a 75% reduction in disciplinary rates, which is extraordinary. Oh, excuse me, just briefly. I'm sorry. There we go. All right, my tea kettle just blasted away. Anyway, we demonstrate a 75% reduction in disciplinary rates, and that sustained the Arts and Corrections program for many years. That statistic, we could bring it up, say this is a useful program. When the program was eliminated in 2003 and then fully eliminated in 2010, we're dropped. And then working with Alma, we restarted the program, and we knew when we restarted it that we would have to have a research component to show the effectiveness of the program. So Larry rejoined us and contributed a tremendous amount to this work. And one of the things that Larry did is he looked at theories. We discussed this in the chapter, but different theories of change. And the one that he come up there, the traditional one was the RNR model. I'm sorry. Yeah, the RNR model, but we came up with he came up with the Good Lives model, which addresses the person as a whole, and through that, it seemed to fit more closely with the Arts and Corrections program, and what the change that was going on with people as individuals and not just their own peculiar criminogenic needs and things like that. We did undertake a training with the University of Cincinnati Corrections Institute, which has something called the Correctional Programs Checklist. And the Correctional Programs Checklist has become the gold standard for evidence-based corrections programs. It's used throughout the United States with in-prison programs, also with parole and probation-based programs. So we did the training on that, and what we found was that there were certain areas of the checklist that Arts and Corrections just didn't fit at all. The program is set up to the checklist is set up to measure mostly programs for drug and alcohol treatment and addressing particular criminogenic needs and stuff like this. So on one level, we couldn't fit in at all, but on other levels, we could fit in. And so this was something, a part of our research project that we thought would be tremendously useful, because we think that despite the fact that there are certain areas that arts programs, prison arts programs, would not measure well in the checklist, there are other areas where it measure very well. And this was particularly in the area of the quality of the instruction and the way that the students responded to the activities. So that was very important. And let's see, I think that's pretty much that. We call that the low-hanging fruit on the Correctional Programs Checklist, and we have that article on the William James Association website, which I listed that on my chat. Third thing we had a failure in our program, which is that it's a measure. It kind of reflects the difficulty that all of us have in working with corrections. In our case, we'd started a program of interviewing Arts and Corrections participants and using the rubric that Larry had developed about change and measuring certain words that came up in interviews. And we'd undertaken this at a California prison, And in the middle of the process, the prison changed the rules and expected us to release a copy of the transcript to them. And unfortunately, we did, and that violated the rules of the study. And the IRB that we were working under canceled the study for obvious reasons. So that was unfortunate. But what we did have is we had a project underway that looked like it was going to come up with the sort of the sort of information that would be akin to the 1983 study, where it would justify arts programming. And I think that's really what we want to do more than anything else. We want to find information that we can take to politicians and directors of corrections and say, this is a valuable program. We know we've experienced that, and our participants have experienced that. So, that's what we hope can come out of this. And finally, I'm going to mention one other thing briefly here, which is that I'm involved in a project now with a former student of mine. He's calling it Time Out, and he's interviewing formerly incarcerated people from Soledad Prison, and also staff people, both free staff, as he calls it, and correctional staff, about the community that existed there and how it affected him and how it affected other people. And I see mentions of this. It strikes me, and in working with on this project, that it is critical as we move forward in any kind of a research activity, and also I think in program planning, that we incorporate the experience of formerly incarcerated people. They are the experts. We actually, the William James Association, now we have 3 different formerly incarcerated people teaching in our program. They're incredibly effective in the prison system. They know how to deal with the problems when they come up. And in working with Harv, I found the same thing in this particular project that we're working on, that he knows stuff that I just wouldn't think about, like what it's like to be a lifer, and how that affects the prison, how you deal with the difficulty. Our students, and I think a lot of us don't realize this, our students have to go through a lot just to get to an arts and corrections class, or, a program class. And we look at how people will work over the phone, and we have to learn about that part of it and incorporate that into the research moving forward. So anyway, that's the last little piece. Larry and Lori both send their regrets. They couldn't be here. I wish Larry were able to explain it. He's much more better at it than I, but yeah.
Jack mentioned moving forward, and I actually wanted to bring in Silke, if I could, who's one of the bright new thinkers who really has picked up a similar thread. And maybe you can tell us kind of just briefly some of the outcomes of your research at this point, what you've undertaken and where it's leading you, if you're willing.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Mandy. Maybe just to start to what my research is about, to make it clear for everyone, is I also started from this point where everyone was talking about the positive impact of music and social impact of music, and I wanted to know, of course, as Jack, and how and why do music programs then have this positive outcome. And in my research, as a starting researcher, I was finding my way through all of this. And I use this perspective called realist science. And that's also what my chapter is about. So how I implement this perspective. And it's a perspective actually that looks more at causal relationships and underlying processes. So it focuses on the outcomes, the positive influences, but it also looks at, okay, well, what are underlying mechanisms? And for instance, in my research and also in the book, I highlighted one example of a mechanism, which is, for instance, the approach of the music facilitator. It's a very important mechanism that make that people react in a certain way to the program that's being organized. They were often described as very humane people, but they also had take up like this managing role. And these aspects make that people respond to this in certain ways. And then another thing, it's also very important to look at the context. So it's not only the mechanism, but the mechanisms function in certain contextual factors or contexts, and especially in a prison, because I focus on prisons, it's a very specific context. So it's also very important to focus on these aspects. For instance, in the prison, is there the right infrastructure to make music, or are there security measures taken which make it harder for music activities to be organized and things like that? So those are aspects that I focus on in my research with this certain perspective of realist science to delve deeper into aspects which might be important for practitioners, but also for policymakers to know, okay, what are aspects that we need to focus on or that are important to look at when organizing music programs in prisons.
Thank you, Silke. I just got a message from Mary. I don't know if everyone got it, but we're getting close to time. And Mary, I think you have another meeting. So if you don't mind, I'm going to usurp your the description of your chapter, which Mary's chapter is really pivotal in the book because she talks about how she has moved from a positionality of sort of traditional research approaches of us looking at them to us together. And so right now she's doing autoethnographies with incarcerated participants. She's had a few published, but that's why her chapter is really, really important. And that kind of provides the pivot point to talking about how participants in these programs are becoming researchers themselves, so that there's less of a dichotomy. And we actually, when I emailed Mary about who might be on this call, she surprised me by saying that there may be roughly half and half researchers and practitioners, and we're really interested in your questions. And Laura, are we okay? Except that there's something very important on the screen right now. Laura, do you want to talk briefly about that? And maybe we could get a couple of questions or comments?
Yeah, you'll notice that I'm shamelessly sharing the brilliant endorsements that we've had. So Alma, who's on this call, we're very grateful to for providing an endorsement for this book. You will have seen that I put a quote on the slide before this one. Hopefully you had a chance to read it, from Lorraine Gelsthorpe at the Institute of Criminology. So you'll notice that we've had endorsements from really amazing and inspirational people from the UK, from the United States, and last but not least, from Neil Wallace over in New Zealand. So I'll just leave that up there in a minute. We've these quotes, I mean, we're just delighted with them, and the very kind words from people who've had a sneak preview of the book, and these endorsements appear on the website. So we wanted to make sure that we shared them with you. I'll leave this quote on screen for a second just before we move on to the questions that we've posed. We've actually got quite a few questions that we've posed for you that I think we're not going to have time to go through, but we'll pop them in the chat because there are some. I think they're questions that we want to use to prompt thinking and discussion off the back of this book. I think we're already talking about, we're delighted with the book, but also we can see where it could go next into a future iteration and where we might want to broaden the scope. So I think we hope that some of these questions are a real start point for what happens next and building this up. So I will put the questions on screen, but just in case anyone does have to leave, can I just first say we'll put a link to the book in the chat, but I wanted you to note that there is a 20% discount code from Routledge at the minute with this code on screen, Routledge ASC. But we'll share that in the chat as well. But Mandy, back to you and these questions. Oh, Mandy,
I'm actually just putting my email in the the chat, because we would absolutely love to hear from anybody. And these questions really, I'm looking at the second set of questions. We're really interested in how people on the call view research, if they've thought about it, if they've conducted any. Rajul, I think you've done a study, which I would love to see, and how you think it might fit into any kind of programming, but also into the progression of the field. I'm putting my email in the chat, but if anybody wants to speak up now, that would be wonderful. I see that somebody from Sing Sing Prison Museum put a note in the chat. Did you want to say anything more about museums?
Hello, let me put my video on. Hi.
Hi.
I'm blown away. Like, I guess this is research I've been doing working with them as kind of just a consult, like a fellowship over the summer. But I'm really realizing how much tour guides at museums play a role into how we have these kind of general conversations with the public. I made a reflective exercise using, art stuff at the end of a walking tour, and it made such a difference in these conversations with people to not be just like commenting on the tour, but actually after a tour have some sort of art reflective exercise that kind of brought some more empathy into how directly impacted people might feel. And the presence of me being there would totally change the dynamic of the group. But I'm wondering, just like while we're talking about all of this, I mean, I haven't read the book, obviously, but just how if arts and corrections is obviously proven to make such a difference, how do we then take some of that programming and some of the directly impacted people and start using them in these, I don't know, I think it's like 42 different prison museums in the United States, some of which are more, like dark tourism than it is really any sort of help. So I don't know. I'm just wondering if anyone in the room has any idea of how we can move into these museums with some of our programming that's already established. I see a lot of museums who are looking for directly impacted people to help them. And it's kind of like an ethically dilemma to be working with the prison museum. I digress. I think it's taken it too far, but I'm wondering if anyone has any thoughts about how museums might intersect with some of this arts and criminal justice research.
Wow, I'm so glad you're here at this call, because I visited the Eastern State Penitentiary Museum when I was in Philadelphia last November. And then the gentleman from that museum joined a call of ours. And I think a big question is, what's the purpose of the museums? Do we have an opportunity to really think critically about prisons when it comes to how the narrative that people from prison museums are discussing ideas? Because the general public, over and over again, I notice, don't understand the problems and just assume that prisons are doing their job. And an educational program needs to really speak to that. Elle.
Yeah, I'll go really quick. I am formerly incarcerated and also involved in a performance arts program. And we did a performance at the oldest known prison in the United States. It's called Old Newgate Prison in East Granby. And it was fabulous. And we invited all kinds of artists. And inside that prison, they had a museum of all art. It was fabulous. So that was a way to kind of weed out, if you will, some of the people that are into that doom and gloom stuff, and bring the people that want to know what they can do to bring about change as they listen to our stories, our songs that we wrote, our dances we performed. And that was a huge impact from just the people that came that wanted to see the beautiful art, and that weren't just there to talk about doom and gloom, but were there to talk about what they could do to make a difference.
Mary, can I say something from the research point of view on what's just being discussed? she's gone. She may be gone.
I'm here. I just said
Oh,
yes. Yes, I
oh,
was nodding. I was nodding and my
okay.
thumb was up.
To put this in a somewhat dry terms, that there is a concept called psychological proximity. I don't know if anybody's heard of this, but very simply and kind of crudely, I guess, the idea is people on the outside may not be able to connect directly with an incarcerated person. That might feel too much, but they can connect with their artwork. And they're actually Mary has been very successful in connecting, inside outside. But there is a study from Wayne State University that actually looks at this methodologically and with regard to poetry written by incarcerated people, and I can get that information to anyone who needs it.
Thank you. I think for time, I'll go ahead and close the recording, but we can still stay on the call unless Mandy or Laura, you want to say anything else about your book before we close the recording?
For me, just to say thank you to everyone who's contributed and been on the call today, Mandy.
And big congratulations, Laura and Mandy. This was such a huge project. We just are really grateful that all the work you've done and all of the authors. Let's give a heads up to David Gusak and Jenny Henley and Ella Simpson, Lorraine Gauman. I apologize if I'm pronouncing names wrong. And Rand Hazu and Sarah Woodland, as well as Silke's co-authors and Larry Brewster
And
Reginald Daniels. Absolutely.
And Mary, thank you so much for putting this together and also for your beautiful email and your beautiful background there, which happens to be the cover of our book, speaking of shameless promotions. So thank you, everybody.
Yay. All right.
I'm thinking we'll put something in a forthcoming newsletter for California Lawyers for the Arts. Is it okay to publicize the discount code?
Laura, do you?
I'm going to say yes. I don't really know the answer to that, so let's just say yes.
Okay. All right, super.